Welcome back to another build guide. Today we have my take on the Cold Imbue Flurry build. Now when I first started with Flurry, this is not how I saw the build going. I was expecting a similar but weaker version of Twisting Blades, but to my surprise this build plays completely different to any of the Twisting Blade builds I've done. The mobility and crowd control of this build is insane, being able to fly through packs of enemies, freezing and stunning them while you hit huge bursts of damage feels amazing. For skills, we will be using Shadow Step, Dash, Flurry, Cold Imbue, Caltrops, and Puncture, with our specialization being combo points. Using combo points with Flurry doesn't just give you that damage increase, but it also gives you a very nice attack speed bonus, giving us 30% attack speed for up to 4.5 seconds. Because of this, I really leaned into focusing on attack speed for this build, as attack speed doesn't only let us spam faster, it also speeds up the dash, shadow step, and caltrops animations, letting us cycle faster through skills and keeping up on our crowd control. Most of our damage comes from stunning and freezing our enemies. We stun by evading through enemies and then attacking with Flurry to get our 2.5 second stun off. We then will use Cold Imbue or Caltrops to freeze the targets, giving huge damage bonuses against them. Caltrops is great because not only do we get a jump backwards and reposition, it also gives us more freezing and a big damage increase when they're inside the Caltrops because of Ambush Master. Your most common skill rotation will look something like Dash in, Flurry for attack speed, Caltrops to jump back, Shadow Step back in, evade through, and Flurry spam using Cold Imbue when it's up. And for bosses, since our damage comes from stunned and frozen enemies, you'll see that boss fights are off to a slow start. However, we can CC bosses super fast by evading through and flurrying to build up that stagger bar, and once the boss is staggered, you finish them up pretty quickly. First we'll talk about gear and stat priorities, and then we'll move on to our aspects. First up, with our helmet, get ranks to Cold Imbue, life, cooldown reduction, and armor percent. For our chest plate, get life, damage reduction from close, and damage reduction from distant. On our gloves, we want ranks to Flurry, crit chance, attack speed, and crit damage with imbued skills. On our pants, we want the same thing as our chest plate, that being life, damage reduction from close, and damage reduction from distance. And for our boots, make sure to have the attacks reduce evade cooldown. This is very important to have up so we can constantly evade through enemies and get our stuns off as much as possible. Once you have that, then go for movement speed, energy cost reduction, all stat, and damage reduction while injured. As for our jewelry, on our amulet, we want cooldown reduction and ranks to weapon mastery. For your third and fourth rolls, you can either go more defensively with some damage reduction rolls, or go for movement speed with dex percent. Our rings, we want life, crit chance, crit damage, and vulnerable damage. As for our weapons, on our crossbow, we want crit damage, vulnerable damage, core damage, and either dex or all stat. I was using all stat to help hit some node bonuses on the Paragon board. And as normal, item power doesn't matter for a crossbow, just aim for about 725 to get those stat bonuses. For a one-hand sword, get crit damage, vulnerable damage, core damage, and dex. And for our offhand, we can either use another one-hand sword or condemnation here. I did some testing with another one-hand sword that was item power 816 with similar stats as my main sword, and overall condemnation did feel better. Not only did it feel like more damage, but you also get more attack speed out of using a dagger here. Finally, the aspects. First up is defensive aspects. In this build, we are only using 2 defensive aspects, those being Might and Disobedience. Our third defense slot, we pick up Frostbitten here. Frostbitten is super strong, especially when we stack both a stun and a freeze onto an enemy, but it's not 100% needed. So if you are wanting some more survivability, go ahead and pick up Cheats instead. And on our boots, go ahead and get Ravengers for an extra Shadow Step charge. And for our offensive aspects, on our crossbow, I went for Accelerating. Having this here really makes all the skills of the build flow together nicely. On our amulet, place Retribution here. This aspect is a must-have, giving us up to 60% increased damage against stunned enemies. And for our last slots, pick up Edge Masters, Encircling Blades, and Trickster's aspect. Trickster's has great synergy with Frostbitten, allowing for the stun grenades that come out of the Caltrops to freeze the targets. But if you're not using Frostbitten and you're using cheats, go ahead and get Expectant in place of this. I want to quickly talk about grenade aspects in combination with Frostbitten. There's an aspect called Surprise that allows you to drop stun grenades when you evade or shadow step. For some reason, these grenades weren't freezing like I thought they would. They seem to be the same grenades that come out of Tricksters, so it might be bugged. It's still a really strong aspect to have as we're constantly evading and using shadow step, so you can use this in place of Tricksters. As of right now, I do prefer using Tricksters, but if they fix it to make these surprise grenades freeze, then I would swap to it. And lastly, our energy sustain aspect. This build does fly through our energy, so I do recommend having 2 rings to swap out. One would be Umbrals and the other would be Energizing. Using Umbrals when you're running through the dungeon, and when you get to the boss room, you'd swap out for your Energizing ring. Put Umbrals on whichever ring is better, and if you don't have an extra ring that you can use, just use Energizing. Because if you get to that boss room and you don't have Energizing, fighting that boss is going to be a nightmare. So a quick rundown of our skill tree is we're picking up Puncture with Fundamental. Go ahead and do 3 steps into Stutter Step, 3 into Sturdy, 3 into Siphoning. Max out Flurry with Enhanced Flurry, which is really nice. This gives us crazy sustain. And then, of course, Advanced Flurry to be able to stun those enemies. Shadow Step with Disciplined Shadow Step. 1 into Rugged, 3 into Reactive Defense, 3 into Weapon Mastery, 1 into Caltrops. Go ahead and pick up Methodical Caltrops here. Dash with Enhanced Dash for that extra crit damage. 3 into Exploit, 3 into Malice, 3 into Precision Imbuement, 2 points into Cold Imbuement with Enhanced and Mixed, and then go ahead and get Frigid Finesse. Then we'll go ahead and pick up Innervation, and finally 1 into Adrenaline, 3 into Haste, and of course, Close Quarters. And finally, our Paragon board. Now, I did change a little bit with the boards and their order. So the order that we're going to pick the boards up is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The glyphs that we're using is Closer, Turf, Chip, Combat, Control, and Exploit. If you are a lower level, go ahead and pick up Exploit into this board here. Exploit is a really strong glyph, probably the best Rogue has, and it's definitely a must to get that up as soon as possible. Other than that, we are picking up a bunch more of these rare and magic nodes throughout the board, giving us a lot of critical damage and some vulnerable damage. But yeah, that pretty much sums up our Paragon board. And that brings us to the end of this build guide. I had a lot of fun with this build, and it's made me even more excited to explore and create builds for Rogue. Let me know what you think of the build, or if you have any improvements in the comments below. As for the results of the poll I posted a few days ago, looks like a D4 mechanics video is next, and then we'll move on to Range Rogue right after. And sorry about the delay for this video. It was planned to get out on Wednesday, but I got caught up with a few things and had to delay it. But yeah, if you want to stay updated with all my latest build guides and polls, give this video a like and subscribe. That's all for today. Have fun and take care.